Next is about the sharirasankhya vyakaram shariram vyakhyasyaमः यथोवाच भगवान् शुक्रशोणितं गर्भाशयस्थं आत्मप्रकृति विकारसम्मूर्छितं गर्भ इत्युच्यते तं चेतनावस्थितं वायुः विभजति तेज एनं पचति आपः क्लेदयन्ति पृथ्वी संहन्ति आकाशं विवर्धयति एवं विवर्जितः स यदा हस्तपादजिह्वाघ्राणकर्णनितम्ब आदिभिः अङ्गैः उपेतः तदा शरीरम् इति संज्ञां लभते तच्च षडङ्गं शाखाः चतस्रः मध्यं पञ्चमं षष्ठं शिरः इति. Now, the moment there is a fertilization, the sperm and the ovum is together, merged together, or that conception, the product is called as garbha or the zygote. We use the term zygote, and it takes the nourishment. The important is when that life process starts and how it nourishes. See, we know that the fetus, zygote would take the name, we use the name of fetus when the zygote goes to the stage of morula and then it gets embedded in the uterine endometrium, then we use the term fetus. Till then the term is zygote or embryo. The embryo is the other term used for that. Now Sushruta also has used exactly the same typical nomenclature. Garbha is the word given for that initial stage of the fertilization, the conceived product, which gradually takes the nourishment directly from the mucosa of the uterus or maybe the surroundings as such. It's called as a fetus or when the fetal organs are developed or when it's getting embedded, and then it will have a independent circulatory structure, that yolk sac, and then the formation of the placenta. That would be the next stage of nourishment. Now, during this stage, the initial stage, the nourishment of the zygote would be, initially it would be by the substances which are present within the cells. The nucleus and this cytoplasmic material itself would have some energy stored in, and then as it migrates to the endometrium, it takes the nourishment directly from the endometrial mucosa, and then gradually there will be the independent circulatory structures formed, and then the fetal organs are developed, and only when the fetal organs are developed, that's called as sharira. So garbha and sharira, these two words, they have a definite technical meanings. Garbha is that stage where the zygote has been formed and it's in the stage of gradually developing and taking the nourishment, that vivardhana, the stage of the vardhana. Then it's called a sharira when the independent structures are formed. Now, how the nourishment starts at the moment of the fertilization. Initially it's a single cell. How it can get nourishment? Now, from the Sushruta, what he has said is, he would be, that structure would be taking the nourishment directly from the nature in the form of the Panchamahabhutas, and the Panchamahabhutas would be doing the function like Prithvi Samhanti, Prithvi Mahabhuta, which gives the mass, adds to the mass. Akasham Vivardhayati, the Akasha gives the space for the growth. Then Vayuhu Vibhajati, Vata Mahabhuta would be giving that structural differences. It forms that cavities and then all that different structures. Tera Yenam Pachati Apah Kledayanti, the moisture to the organs which helps in movement of the substances in between is facilitated by the Apmahabhuta, and the metabolic activity, the chemical activity which occurs is regulated by the Tedomahabhuta. So it's exactly the same, what you call as the anabolism of the growth or anabolic phases. In the anabolic phases, you need to have that structural substances in the cell, the reticular component, and then there should be a space. Obviously, if there is no space, it cannot grow, and these structures are developed during that formation of the different cavities and other structures. That's why we Vibhajati. Then biochemical reactions and the flow of fluid and electrolytes, that keeps the biochemical activity alive, and that's how the life process starts. See, now what is life, or whether it's a life process? There is a difference between the two from our point of view. From Ayurvedic point of view, Atma is something different and Atma Lakshana is something different. Atma, how it enters in, this is Of course, it's due to the unknown factors, like directly it enters into the structure, zygote, once it is formed. Nourishment, how it grows, that Ashtanga has given a beautiful description. Nanu sattva kuksho pravishta garbhasya vardhane hetuhu uktah न च स्य प्रवेश उपलभ्यते इत्याह तेजः यदा अर्करश्मीनां स्फटिकेन तिरस्कृतं नेन्धनं दृश्यते गच्छत् सत्त्वो गर्भाशयं तथा. Now for the entry of the life, that Atma, to enter in to this zygote, there is no need of energy, and it enters in without being aware of or without being known or without being identified. But once it enters in, it starts with the function, and that function of receiving the energy or development, the processing of the development, it occurs spontaneously and without any previous pre-existing energy as such. Nendhanam drishyate, there is no need of indhana or energy for this activity of the life process to start. And what Bhagavata has said is, I compare it to the reflection of the sunlight from a crystal. When a crystal is exposed to the sunlight, the light is reflected by that crystal. Similarly, the energy which is present in the surrounding area itself would be, or in the nature itself would be reflected by that life process, and the life process starts, and then it starts growing. Then as the growth occurs, the growth is by the nourishment of the mother. So it's often a very bold statement now, or very regular statement, which is often presented in the current situation, is you are what you eat and also what your mother ate. That's exactly mentioned by the Taittiriya Upanishad as ahamannam, 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 ahamannad, annadaha, ahamannadaha, ahamannadaha. So whatever my identity, the identity is the food I have eaten as well as the food eaten by mother. Further, the growth occurs from Indian philosophy point of view, from this Purusha Sutta, but it's mentioned, it's a very important issue. As the growth occurs, there will be mainly 4 components of the growth. The 4 components of the growth is not only the physical structures. The physical structures, of course, are one which is quite visibly seen, but along with that, there will be an intellectual capacity, the capacity to retain, understand the surroundings, then a capacity to react to that environment, that's the another of the capacity, and the third is the capacity to have the perception as such. Now, how these are produced? Like what Purusha Sutta says is mukham kimasya gaubaho kavuru padam chete yat purusham vedhu katida vekalpen. That Purusha would be producing that different structures, and the structures are mukha, uru, pada, etc. The different structures. Brahmanosya mukhamasit bahur aranyakritaha uru tadasya dveshah padhyam shudro data. These structures are produced with a specific personality identification structures. The personality structures are the intellectual capacity and the physical activity, the strength of the physical activity, bahu, and uru, that's the capacity to exert the energy and the capacity to move or react to the environment. So the 4 capacities are generated at the time of the birth, and these are present in each individual. And the words like Brahmana, Vaishya or Shudra or Kshatriya, the 4 varnas, they are not the categories which are seen or which are not considered to be the caste as such. Basically, these 4 are the individual calibers, or the signs of the life present in a person, and signs of life are in a different manner compared to the other usual biochemical division. Or what we generally consider from the biology is different from that. The basic is the intellectual capacity, that's Brahmana guna, then the capacity to exert or put the energy, that's the Kshatriya guna, then the capacity to retain or stand do the activity, physical activity, the Vaishya guna, and then the exert, or strain, take the strain, that's the Shudra guna. So it's present in everybody. It's not suggestive of the classes. Depending upon the prominence, you may have certain categorization of the personality, like Brahmana personality, Vaishya personality, and so on. But it's not decided by the this caste of the mother. It's not the caste as such. It's about the type of the personality which is mentioned, and this depends upon, this can be depending upon the type of the food consumed by the mother. It's influenced by the type of the food by the mother as such. Then the others are the manaha, the capacity to understand the surroundings. That's produced from the nature. Chandrama manaso jatah, chakshuh surya ho jayega. From surya it is chakshuh, mukha indrashtagnishta. The capacity to pronounce and speak is by the Indra and Agni. Prana Vayu Jayata. The Vayu will give the prana the capacity to take the oxygen as such. Nabhyam Asid Antariksham. Antariksham, the space which is needed for the movement of the substances in the body is in the Nabhi, and it's produced by the Antariksham Mahabhuta or Akasha Mahabhuta. Srishno Dyohu Samavartada. In the Shirsha, the Akasha Mahabhuta again is retained in the Shirsha asset. Padhyam Bhumihi Disha Shrotra Tata Lokan Akalpayana. This is how the whole body is formed. Now, that's about the philosophical aspect, the Vedic view of the formation of the body. From medical point of view, once the body is formed, the structures are identified, the organs of the body are identified, and those are called as Anga and Pratyanga. Sushruta has mentioned two classes. The Anga are mainly Shakaha, Chatasraha, Madhyama, Madhya and Shiraha. The Chatasra Shakaha, 4 limbs, then core part of the body, and the head and neck. Now this is exactly how you classify the body or assess the body in the anatomy. When you go for the anatomy in the text classes, in the beginning of anatomy, when the body is studied, the body is studied in the same form, like the limbs, then the head and neck, then the abdomen and thorax. Now the core part we now identify as the head and this abdomen and neck. Sushila has considered this as one. Then further pratyanga, the specific further organs are mastaka, that's the forehead, udara, the central abdomen, pristha, the back or the lumbar area, nabi, the umbilicus, lalata, forehead again on the anterior side, then nasa, nose, chibuka, the chin as basti, the bladder area or the lower abdomen, griva, neck, ite, kahya, keka. These are given as the examples of different specified organs of the body or the further defined structures. So, study of the body starts with initially the gross, the limbs, core, then head and neck, then goes into the further detailed structures, the substructures, like the different identified structures, like, and along with that, there may be these different organs of the body could be presented in different manners. Some may be in twins, some may be single, some may be in higher numbers. So that studying of these numbers is the purpose of the chapter. And the given examples are Karna, Netra, Bhru, Shankha, Amsa, Ganda, Kaksha, Stana, Vamshana, Vrishana, Parshva, Spikal, Janu, Kurpara, Bahu, Uru, Prabhutreha, Dve, Dve. The organs which are presented as twins, two organs are the ears, eyes, then the eyebrows, the chins, like the chins of Shankha is the chins as it, Amsa, the shoulder area, then Ganda, the prominent portions of the face, temporal area, Kaksha, axilla, Sana, the breast, Vamshana, inguinal area, Vrishana, scrotum, and the testicles, Parshva, the lumbar area, Spik, the buttocks, Janu, the knee joint or knee area, Kurpara, then elbow joint, Bahu, the arms, Uru, the thighs. These are presented as twins, two organs of the body. Now, whenever you have two twin organs of the body, the purpose could be either there is a need of balanced activity, or there is a need of wider spectrum of the activity, or the two organs could be given as a reserve. Reserve in the sense, if one organ fails, then the other organ would be functioning. Like, give an example, the eyes, the two eyes would have to extend the range of vision, because you have two eyes, you can see a wider area. Then the two limbs they would be supporting that specific activity of movement, that rhythmic movement of the two legs that helps in movement. Whereas in the, of course, Sushila has not mentioned about the internal organs, like the kidneys. In the kidneys, it does act as a reserve. If one kidney fails, the other kidney will take up the function. So, whenever there are more than one organs of the body or one replication of the organs of the body, the purpose could be either enhance the spectrum or for a rhythmic activity or coordinated activity or as a reserve. Now, Vimshatiha Anguliha, the fingers are 20 in the sense 5 each in hands and then legs. Srotam Shivakshamanani. Slotas, they will be detailed later, and there are two versions. There are counted slotas and then the innumerable slotas. We'll come to that part when you go into the slotas description. Yasha Pratyanga Vibhaga Uktaha. Tasya Punah Sankyanam, the further detailed, going into the detail in terms of the functions of the body, are the physiological aspects of these structures. They are again are named as the individual organs, which are Tvajaha, Kala, Tvajaha, the surface of the body, which we call as the skin and the deep fascia. Kalaha, the Dhapat Ashayantarmadhyadaha, that the fascias which separate the structures. Tvaja and Kala we have discussed in the previous chapter in detail. Dhatavaha, that's different dhatus. Malaha, as you know, the products which are to be eliminated products of the body. Dosha, the Tridosha. Yakrat Pliha now, the different organs like Yakrat Pliha, Pupusa, Undukaha, Hridayam, Amashayaha, Andrani, Brukha, Srotamsi, Kandaraha, Jalani, Purtaha, Rajavaha, Sevanyaha, Sanghataha, Simantaha, Astini, Sandhayaha, Snayamaha, Peshyaha, Marmani, Sira, Dhamanyaho, Yogahani, Srotamscha. The different organs named are the structures of the body are different, either visceral organs or the suspensory structures of the body, and their details will be studied in due course of time in the same chapter. So that more about these organs we will be discussing as we go further. Tatra Tvajaha Sapta, Kalaha Sapta, the 7 kalas and the 7 types of the tvaka or the layers of the tvaka we have discussed already. Tvajo Abhitaha Kalaha, Tvajaha Abhitaha Kalaha. The previous in chapter we have discussed. Further, Ashayaha Sapta. Ashayas are 7. Dhatavah Sapta. Dhatus are 7. Sapta Sira Shatani, 700 Siras. Panja Peshi Shatani, 500 Peshis. Nama Snayu Shatani, 900 Snayus. Trini Asti Shatani, 300 Asti. Devdashottarai Sandhishate, 1200 Sandhis as such. Saptottaram Marmashatam, 112 Sandhi, Saptottaram Marmashatam, 107 Marmas, and Chaturvimshati Dhamanyaha, 24 Dhamanis, Trayo Doshaha, 3 Doshaha, Trayo Malaha, 3 Malaha, Namasrotamsi, 9 Srotas, Shodasha Kandaraha, Shodasha Jalani, Shatkurjaha, Chatasro Rajavaha, Sapta Sevanyaha, Chaturdasha Sangataha, Chaturdasha Simantaha, Dvayumshati Yogavahani Srotamsi, Dukani Antrani, Iti Samasaha. Now, these are all the numbers of the organs as per Sushruta has Sushruda's anatomy, or Sushruta has described anatomy. Now, when it comes to the question of identification of the structures and naming those structures, the concept which we use now and which Sushruta had used are different. In the present day situation, in the present anatomy, we give a lot of importance to the microscopic structure of the body. Whenever we identify a tissue, that tissue is identified based upon the microscopic structure of that particular organ or the tissue. Like when you have a typical epithelial structures, you call it as epithelial surface or mucous membrane. The muscle would have a typical structure. Bone would also have a unit like a Haversian system and so on. So based upon that microscopic structure, we identify those organs. Moreover, whenever it is a question of counting and then naming them, it's a different perception as you do for the dissection methods. In the present dissection methods, you have a advanced technology of preserving the body, and based upon that, the structures which are identified during the dissection, you count them. Like when you identify a muscle, we identify a muscle along with its origin and insertion. From the origin to the insertion, it's considered as a single muscle. But from Sushruda's point of view, the identification will be something different. The muscles when the muscular portion, that fleshy portion is called as the peshi, then the tendinous portion is called as kandara or snayu, depending upon the shapes. So that perception is somewhat different, and based upon that, you will have some different numbers. So it may not be possible to identify the same numbers with the current anatomy textbooks. In the current anatomy textbooks, you may not see the same numbers, but you can perceive the idea of what Sushila has said, and virtually these numbers need not be area of confusion. The whole issue is how this is perceived. So we will go into that detail of how this perception occurs, or how the perception is different in the current anatomy and what Sushila had perceived as it. Then as far as the other functional anatomy structures like doshas, they are not visible, they cannot be described in the current anatomy, so that's beyond the purview of the current anatomy. So current perception of the anatomy and Sushila's perception of the sharirasankhya, there is a slight difference, and this difference has to be kept in mind. Sushila, in as such, as we have already discussed in many times earlier, Sushila has given more importance to the functional anatomy than the visible structures. The present day's anatomy, we give more importance to the microscopic structure than simply the visible nature. That's all the point. Then go into the individual, now we go into the details of these individual organs. Ashayaha. Ashayastu Vatashaya, Pittashaya, Shleshmashaya, Raktashaya, Amashaya, Pakvashaya, Mutrashaya, Sriram Garbhashayu Astamahiti. So basically there are 7 ashaya, but the 8th ashaya is Garbhashaya, which is present in the women. Sadhatrivyamani Antrani Pumsam, Sriram Martapyamahirani. Antra, the intestines, which are part of the Pakvashaya, they are, according to Sushila, the dimensions are different in a male and the female. Of course, that's a matter of controversy whether it is true or not. Now, the word Ashaya, again, its definition is defined as Ashaya Adhishtanam, the Adhisthana asset. Then, as far as the intestines are concerned, now the whole issue is, in many times you speak of many other ashayas. Purishashaya is also mentioned. Pakvashaya, usually, I will not go into the detail further, but in general, whenever we discuss about the anatomy, Pakvashaya we consider it as a large intestine. Buddha is something different. Purishashaya also is mentioned. So, there could be a confusion about that nomenclature. That confusion need not be presented over there. Now, what Sushila has given that importance is, depending upon the functions, they are named at different contexts with different names. Like Pittashaya Adha Pakvashaya. Pakvashaya is a structure which is distal to the Pittashaya. Tasya ekadeshe vibhakta maladharam unduka udyate. The other unduka Pakvashayo binnaha ityarthaha. Now that unduka, the fecal retaining structure, that's cecum as well as the large intestine, the further. These are the areas which contain mala, that's after the absorption, post-absorption areas are somewhat more residue. See, contents of the small intestine, they would have more of absorbable substances, and after the absorption, more and more residue is there. And when the residue content becomes more, that area is considered as a maladhara or purishashaya. So there is no need of confusion. Sushruta has clearly mentioned, like Purishashaya and Pakvashaya need not be confused. The Pakvashaya itself, in the area where it contains more of residual contents, that's called as the Purishashaya or Unduka. So Dallana has clarified, in such issues, there is no need of confusion. The confusion would be only because of the other, this perception. Then the next is about the Vatashaya. Now, of course, in Vagbhata, the description of Ashaya is somewhat slightly different. Saptacha Adhara. Vagbhata has used the word Adhara, and there Raktasya Adhyaha. Raktashaya is considered as a first. Then Kramat, Kafa Avapitpapanam Vayo Mutrasya Smraha, Garbhashayo Astamaha, Strinam Pittapakvashaya Antare. The Garbhashaya is in the abdomen, and the Pitta and Pakvashaya, the intestines, form the relationship about these structures. So that straightly there is a difference, again not very huge. The only point is Vagbhata has given the more importance to Raktashaya, and it's considered as the first of the Ashayas. that's not a major issue. Whether it's considered as fourth or the first doesn't make much of a difference. But when we discuss about the ashayas, that's one point which you have to keep in mind. And that kind of a difference of giving that numbers is not a important issue. It's only about how you perceive at that moment. Then the Vatashaya, again there is a lot of confusion, like what's Vatashaya. Now the Vatashaya is a Trata Samasena Vataha Shronikuta Samshaya. In the Vata, when it's described about the Vata functions in Sutrasthana, Sushruta has mentioned the Vata is predominantly located in Shroni and Guda. Tadupari Adho Nabehe Pakvashaya, Pakvamasha Madhyam Pittasya Amashaya Shleshmaha. The whole gastrointestinal tract can be divided into the different portions. The distalmost portion is the Vatashaya. The middle portion is the Pakvashaya, and Pakvashaya Madhyam, in the Pakva Amashaya Madhyam, in between the Amashaya and the Pakvashaya, that's the Pittasthana, that's how it's mentioned. Now Vatashaya, again, lot of issues can be discussed, right? In general, Vata is considered as a structure or substance which is present throughout the body. Achintya Birya Doshanam Netaha Roga Samuharata Ashukarim Hushtar Pakwadhana Budaraya. The basic origin of Vata is in the Pakwadhana, that's the large intestines, bowels as such. And the functions of them are Achintya Virya. It's very difficult to perceive the existing, and it's a fast moving. And whereas again Vagbhata also has repeated the same Pakvashaya Kati Sakti Shrotrasti Sparshanendriyam Sthanam Vatasya Tatra Pakwadhanam Visheshadha. The Vata sthanas, the location of Vata are not only Pakvashaya, it's related to the other structures like Kati, Sakti, Shrotra, etc. depending upon the functions. But Pakwadhanam Visheshadha, Pakvashaya is considered as a prominent one. Now, when Pakvashaya is considered as the sthana of Vatashaya, and when Sushruta counts the ashayas, what is the purpose of counting Vatashaya as one and Pakvashaya as other two, so giving number? This question comes in. To answer that question, maybe we have to look at the issue from a different point of view. So in general, now whenever it comes to question of functions of the Vata, we generally attribute those functions to the nerves and nervous system. And many times, I don't accept that, but many times many Ayurvedists would translate Vata as the nervous system and Vata diseases as neuronal disorders. But to a great extent that context is true. Now, so many and majority of the functions of the Vata are absolutely attributed to the nervous system. Sushruta and all basic theories of Ayurveda, all theories, would be, all Samhitas would accept that Pakvashaya, the intestines, large intestine, as the location of the Vata, and Basti as the major mechanism of intervening with the Vata. So this is another of the fundamental question. Now if you look at the contemporary physiology development, one of the most important theories which is gaining lot of momentum and lot of research activities are going on are the gut-brain axis, area where there is a lot of new information coming up is in the perception of the gut-brain axis, relationship between the intestines and the brain, the neuronal functions. And the research activities, research papers coming up are quite huge in number, and most of this development has occurred in the last 8 or 10 years. Probably that first paper which gives that idea of a gut-brain axis came in 2012, and then onwards there are a lot of researchers. Now I have given you some of these references, if at all you are interested in studying this, reading about. Certain of these references may be from the old and then new, which are quite important and which have containing lot of details about this idea of a relationship between the gut and the brain. Those who are interested, they may read these articles. So going into the summary of these articles is beyond the purview of what we can discuss in our 1 hour class. So I will just keep that part. But in summary, that gut-brain axis says that there is an interrelationship between the nervous system and the intestines, the colon as such. That's the basic theory, the whole idea. In brief, which I have to say that there is a very direct relationship between the gut and the brain. So all your activities, the autonomic nervous system, and hormonal as well as the circulation, immune pathways, endocrine pathways, neural pathways, they are interrelated with the gut and the brain, and that different modes and different factors they are studied in those research articles. So instead of going into that details of that, I would summarize this. Now this is exactly where the Ayurvedic theories of that Vata having the Pakwadhana Gudalaya, Pakwadhana and Guda being the location of Vata would be having highlighted, right? So I am not saying that because the contemporary science has identified that gut brain axis, Vata theory is valid. It's not the way, it's not the point. The point is Vata theory where the Pakwadhana is considered to be the colon is considered as the basis of all that neurological functions by Ayurvedic theory, and which is there for thousands of years. That kind of a theory was there for thousands of years, and that theory which was made fun of by many people earlier now is getting the validity. And this is exactly the point where again highlight, like whenever Ayurvedic theories are there and which may not be justified by or which may not be accepted by the current physiologic aspects, should not be neglected. They should be kept as such, reserved as such, because the current physiology is still growing brand, and as the growth occurs, many of those unidentified hypotheses may be proved or justified. Now this is one of the area where that basic idea of the colon being the source of neurological disorders and the technique of managing the colon environment to improve the neurological conditions is one of the new areas, budding areas in the contemporary science, whereas we have this weapon, a very strong weapon for thousands of years. So the Basti being used for the neurological disorders is a important tool, very significant tool, which makes the difference, and we need to now highlight that, because I am not saying that we need to highlight because the others are accepting, but I would be putting it that way, like the others, the contemporary science was not aware of this treasure of knowledge and a very important tool of dealing with the neurological disorders, and we have that, and we should be now exploiting this situation to the maximum extent. So Ayurvedic point of view, we would be putting the issue in such a way that we would be exploiting this at the situation. So there is no need of confusion about. Instead, that part is a important area, highlight area of our these theories. That's about the Vatashaya in brief. The next is about the Pittashaya. Pittashaya, again, the location of the Pittashaya according to Dhalana, आमाशयात् प्रच्युतं कफाशयात् अभ्यस्तं पक्वाशयोपस्थितं पक्वाशयगमनाय उपस्थितं पित्तस्थानं सम्प्राप्तं धारयति पाकार्थम् इति शेषः. That part of the organ, the Mahasrotas, where the food which has been just expelled out of from the amashaya but has not reached to the Pakwashaya. In between the location, that's the Pittasthana, that's the Pittasthana asset and the Pittashaya. According to Bhagbhata, the locations of the Pitta are Nabhi, Amashaya, Sweda, Lasika, Vidham, Dasaha, Drik, Sparshananti Pittasya, Nabhi, Ratra Visheshvaha. The word Nabhi in the literature is considered as umbilicus, but it need not be rigidly accepted as umbilicus. Rather, it would be the central abdomen, and it relates to the structures in the central abdomen, particularly the stomach and the duodenum. Now, in Charaka, the location of the Pitta is given as Svedo, Raso, Lasikaha, Rudiram, Amashayascha Pittasthana, Tatrapi, Amashayo Visheshana Pittasthana. Charaka has given the word like Amashaya as the Pittasthana. Vagbhata has given the word as the Nabhi as the Pittasthana. Dallana has given detailed that Pittasthana as a structure which is in between Amashaya and the Pakwashaya, that area where the food enters in. Then in Chakrapani, the comment about that Amashaya as the Pittasthana is Pittasthaneshu Amashaya iti Amashaya Adhobhagaha, the lower portion of the Amashaya. Shleshmasthaneshu Amashaya Urdhvagaha. See, Amashaya is considered as a Shleshmasthana and Pittasthana. Chakrapani has given that description like it is the distal portion of the Amashaya and the proximal portion of the Amashaya is considered as Kaphasthana. So now these kinds of difference of opinion or slight variations in the expression need not be a source for confusion. So I will not go into that the issue of confusing the issue, but instead all that is pursued at the idea of the process of the digestion. Now, process of the digestion, as we know, it starts from the oral cavity and it continues up to the end of the colon. But the maximum would be, the digestion would be in the stomach, particularly this stomach structure. And that stomach structure and the functions of the stomach described by Sushruta in Sutrasana, which we have referred to, is a very important issue. The functions of the stomach, amashaya, pittashayasya uparishthata, tat pratyanikatvat urdhvagatitvatu tejasaha. That's because there is a Tejo Mahabhuta, and the Tejo Mahabhuta would be helping in the process of breaking down of the substance. Chandra eva adityasya. Then there is a component of adding the fluid there, making that food homogeneous, liquefying, and that's done by like the Chandra, that moon like. Chaturudasya aharasya adhara is a adhara, the area of retention of the food. Now, when it comes to the question of functions of the stomach, all these are important. Sacha tatra udakaguneha ahara praklinaha bhinna sangataha sukajaraha bhavati. The functions of the stomach are mainly to facilitate these structures, like these functions. Now, the functions of the stomach are mainly, the one is it takes the food and retains the food for a longer duration. See, when it comes to the question of functions of the stomach, from the current physiology point of view, one of the important functions of the stomach would be to as a retainer of the food. Now, when I say retainer of the food, the meaning is, see, you need energy continuously, but you do not take the food continuously. You take the food maybe once, twice in a day, or 4 times in a day, or so on. These are intervals. But the provision of the energy in the body is a uniform, or rather it depends upon the other activities you need. So you need to have a reservoir of the energy, or the consumption of the energy would be maybe in 1 or 2 episodes, but the flow of the energy should be continuous. And this process is a very complex process. Like a food which is taken once or twice has to be reserved, and then it has to have a supply system of the body where the energy is supplied as per the need, like these voltage stabilizers present in the electric circuits. So voltage in the grid is something different, and that voltage has to be supplied to the instruments at a uniform level and in continuity, and that kind of a function, it starts at the stomach. The most important buffer, this mechanism of buffering of the energy, is from the stomach. When you have taken the food is retained in the stomach for 1 to 2 hours, and that itself would be providing, making that flow of the energy somewhat smoother, and then you have the sequence, the cascades of that buffering mechanism till it reaches to the cells in the form of the glucose. Stomach is the first of the organ which makes that activity. That's Chaturvidasya aharasya adhara function is that function which helps in keeping that. Then another important function of the stomach would be, you consume that food of different consistencies, like maybe harder substances, liquid substances, and so on. But the food, when it enters into the intestines, it should be homogeneous, it should be semi-liquid or liquid acid, otherwise absorption would not occur. And the pH also has to be coordinated, maintained at a optimum level. And this maintenance of the pH, and then providing that food which is acceptable, which is assimilable by the intestines, is the function of the stomach. That's praklinaha, bhinna sangataha. Word is different, Sanskrit language is different, but the meaning is the same. And it helps in the digestion. That's another of the function of the stomach. In addition to that, the other function of the stomach is one of the defense mechanism of the body. If at all something which is not suitable to the body is eaten, it is expelled out. That vomiting is done as a protection. So it prevents the body getting harmed. And of course, the acid secreted in the stomach also is a antibacterial, or any organism, microorganisms which could be consumed in excess, or which are not suitable to the body, they will be destroyed by that acidic pH which is produced. So it's a detoxification function also is one of the functions of the stomach. So That's the Aditya and Chandra functions. These functions are achieved depending upon the location as such. Now, when Charaka has mentioned about the Amashaya, the Puro Bhaga, the early portions of the Amashaya and the distal portions of the Amashaya, the proximal portions of the Amashaya being the location of Kapha and the distal portion of the Amashaya being the location of Pitta, is justified when you look at the structures of the stomach glands. The gastric glands there are in the acid producing glands and the enzyme producing glands. They are mucin producing glands. The mucin producing glands are more in the fundal area and the proximal area, whereas acid producing glands are more in the distal area. And the stomach, though the glands otherwise look similar, if you go into the microscopic structure, you can see these the mucous neck cells which are present in the proximal area in larger number, whereas acid producing cells are in the distal portion of the stomach. In total, there is a total added secretion, that praklina secretion will be added to the food from the gastrointestinal tract at different areas, and that process of homogenization, that praklina process, acting food as becoming praklina and sukhajara, that process starts from the oral cavity till the end of the intestines, and around 6.5 liters of fluid is added with different pHs. Now, and this is keeping that process of sukhajara. It starts with adding acidic substances, and the maximum acidity is added in the stomach, and the quantity of the fluid added in the stomach also is quite high. Those small intestinal secretions will be still higher. So now you have a process of adding acidic substances, then it comes to the alkaline substance, the pancreatic secretions, and at the end it becomes homogenized. So this whole process is the Sukhajara process, where the Amashaya and the Pakvashaya, the functions of the Ama and Pakva can be made out. The same issue, again, the different structures of the glands at different areas, salivary gland, the gastric glands and the intestinal secretions, where the different functions are achieved. The functions of homogenizing, functions of the absorption, they start in the oral cavity to the stomach. Absorption is facilitated by the structure. So the function of that different organ is depending upon the structure as such. So that's about the Pittashaya. The next is about the Shleshmashaya, Kaphashaya. Now in the Kaphashaya, the Vagbhata has mentioned Urakanta Shirakloma Parvani Amashayo Rasa Medo Granati Fasya Kafasya Sutramuraha. The Uras, the chest is considered as a Kaphashaya according to Vagbhata in one context. Then that there again, cloma is one of the organ mentioned there in as a Kaphashaya, and the cloma is located as a Hridakshinato Mamsa Granthi on the right side of the heart. A fleshy structure is considered as cloma, and maybe it could be pancreas. Then the other way, we go back to the issue. Urashivo Griva Parvani Amashavu Medasha Shleshmastanani, Tatrapi Uraha Visheshana Shleshmastanam. This is what Charaka has said about. Now, the Urasthana is what is that? Urasthana in the kapha. Probably it's about the issue of the point is, at one context, Amashaya is considered as the Kapasthana. In another context, Uras is considered as the Kapasthana. Again, there is no need of confusion. Amashaya is about the stomach part, which is also a part of the upper abdomen, which is a part of the thorax area, as well as it also relates to the respiratory functions, which could be considered as the Kapashaya. Then the Raktashaya. Raktashaya is then the location of the Raktadhara Kala is mentioned as द्वितीय रक्तधर मांसस्य आभ्यन्तरः तस्यां शोणितं विशेषतः स्थिरासु यकृत् प्लीह्नोश्च भवति. The recta, the major locations of the Raktadhara Kala are the Rakta, maybe which may consider as Raktashaya, could be the this vascular network in the muscles and the Yakrit and Pliha. Now Yakrit and Pliha, the liver and the spleen, being considered as the areas of regulation of the hemopiesis. Very often people would say it's only in the fetal circulation that the spleen and liver would have a role to play. In adult circulation it doesn't, and in adult circulation the hemopiesis is done by mainly the bone marrow, but that's not absolutely true. The bone marrow function also is depending upon the liver and the spleen. If the liver and the spleen is not functioning in a pathological condition, it definitely, the liver and spleen would be affecting the bone marrow, and even in the adult anatomy, importance of the these liver and spleen functions related to the hemopiesis is absolutely needed. Though the function of the hemopiesis is carried to a great extent by the bone marrow in the adult life, whereas in fetal life, the major function of the hemopiesis is done by the liver and spleen, but later on it's just transferred to the bone marrow at the time of the birth, and then during the growth phase it's done by the bone marrow. So to consider that the Yaकृt and Pliha as the source of the Rakta need not be considered as a primitive or wrong as such. It's just that look at the perception. Of course, from the microscopic course and then the growth of the cells, we know that the cells are produced in the bone marrow and then they are migrated in the adult life, but they are dependent upon the functions of the liver, and hence it's justified. Then that Amashaya, as I told you about that Amashaya, the functions of the Amashaya, again the issue about Kapalashaya and Amashaya is the same repetition of the same. As I told you about the functions of the stomach as a reservoir of the food, and then the food converting into a chyme, and the same issue which I have discussed is presented here. And the same is mentioned by Ashtangasaya as Annam Kale Abhyavartam Kostam Prana Anilahradam Dravehi Bina Sangatam Nisam Snehana Mardhyam Sandukshita Samanena Pachate Amashaya Sthidam Audari Agni Yatha Bhashya Stadistam Dvaitandalam. Exactly the same description of these different functions in the shloka in a terminology, and the point is the same description is seen in the current methodology also. It's exactly the same as it. Then comes the Pakvashaya. Pakvashaya Sahi Antaragneha Adhisthanantara Amashayat Pakvashayoन्मुखम अन्नम बलेन विधार्य पित्ततेजसा शोषयति पचति पक्वश्च विमुच्यते दोषाधिष्ठितात् दौर्बल्यात् आममेव आततो असौ अन्नस्य ग्रहणात् पुनः ग्रहणी संज्ञा बलं च तस्याः पित्तमेव अग्र्यम् अभिसानम् अतः सा अग्निस्तब्ध उपबृंहिता एकयोगक्षेमा शरीरं वर्तयति. Now Vagbhata has mentioned that location of the Pakvashaya as a structure in between the Amashaya and the Pakvashaya, and it relates to the duodenum. Whereas, and the Grahani is also mentioned as a Bhukta Marga Argalevasa. It's just like a door lock in between the stomach and the distal portion. So mainly it's about the duodenum and the secretions from the duodenum. But as far as the functions of the Pakvashaya is concerned, I would not limit the Pakvashaya only to the duodenum or the Grahani portion. The whole concept of that Pittasthana may be related to the small intestines, where the digestion and the absorption process continues, though the maximum amount of the additional substances to the digestion are added in the duodenum, like the pancreatic juice and the biliary juice. So, from the current point of view, I would be extending that concept of the Pakvashaya to the small intestines, from the duodenum to the large intestine, where the absorption function is a maximum, digestion function also is maximum. Then Mutrashayo Dhanurvakro Bastiha Atpansagaha Eka Adho Vadanaha Madhye Katyaha Sadyo Nihanti Asun Rute Ashmari Vranat Viddaha Tatra Ubhetascha Mutasravi Ekado Bine Vrane Vahche Yatnadaha. Now the description of Mutrashaya in Vagbhata Sharira is like it's a Dhanurvakra, somewhat curved structure, and Eka Adhodana has one opening. Whereas Sushruta has given the description in the Nidana, which we have already referred to, the description of that Mutrashaya and the Mutra formation, we have discussed that in detail. The Nabhi Pustakati Mushka Buddha Vamshana Shepatam Ekadwara Tanupaka Mathe Basti Adhomukha. Basti is considered as a Mutrashaya, which is Adhomukha, and it's related to the structures of the abdomen. The visceral organs are related there, and in the distally Basti Shirashtiva Paurusham Brusham Buddha Ekasambandhinaha. The distal relationship are the Paurusha, the prostate, and the genital organs. The shape is considered as Alabhvayo Rupena, it's like the Alabu. And Mutrashaya, Eka opening, one opening. Now, when we look at the bladder, we look at the bladder in a different manner from the current anatomy. Bladder as a sac, and then the ureters have the two openings, and the distal urethra has one opening. But if you look at the other way, the functions of the urine formation. The urine formation is done by the kidney, and then the renal pelvis would be the beginning of the collecting system, and then the collecting system, it enters in the bladder, it's retained in the bladder. So if you look at the whole structure as a integral structure of the bladder cavity, the ureters, the renal pelvis together, it looks like a lavabo where the pedicle is there, and it's a single opening. These two openings are part of the same cavity, so and it becomes a echo opening. So there is no question of confusion about it, or you can't say that what Sushila has told is wrong or right. It's about only the perception. These two openings, if you look at the function of the collection of the urine, these have a lesser relevance. But anatomical structures, of course, they are true. And the formation of the urine, according to Sushla, also is by the invisible structures, like invisible structures in the sense now they are visible by the microscope, the nephrons, whereas to the naked eye they are not visible, and that is the Mutrashaya acid. Then Srinam Garbhashaya Ashtamaha. Garbhashaya, the uterus is the eighth of the organ according to Sushla, and those are Garbhashaya, Srinam, Pitta, Pakvashaya, and the relationship are mentioned in Asangade as the organs which are related to the intestines, anatomical relationship. And there again, the Artavaha Srotas is considered as located in the Garbhashaya, linked to the Garbhashaya. Artavaha Dve, Tayor Moolam Garbhashaya, Artavaha Nyashta Dhamanyaha, Tatra Vidhayam Vandityam Maitana Sishtanam. The Artavaha Srotas, the tubes, fallopian tubes, they are related to the Garbhashaya. And the relationship of the Garbhashaya is mentioned even in the context of Mudha Garbha Chikitsa, where the relationship of the Garbhashaya with the visceral structures like Kriha, Antravivara, these are makes the progress difficult, and hence that relationship of the Garbhashaya is mentioned. So there is no confusion about what is Garbhashaya and the anatomy of the Garbhashaya. This anatomical relationship of the Garbhashaya with the intestines are described in Sushruta in detail, exactly the same what is seen in the current anatomy. Not much of a difference, not much to add about that basic anatomy which you study. With this, the ashayas are over. The next is about the srotas. We will continue with the srotas in the next session. If there are any questions, I will try to answer and then wind up. Right, there are not any questions. Fine. So we will wind up today. We will continue next session.